A teenage artist was selling paintings on the Vegas Strip to pay for Chemo when Dean Martin walked by after his Sands Hotel show. What he did next became the most beautiful act of kindness in Vegas history. The folding table had been there since early morning, positioned carefully on the sidewalk outside the Sands Hotel, where the foot traffic was heaviest. 19-year-old Sarah Martinez sat behind it on a borrowed stool, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, hands resting in her lap to hide the trembling that had started getting worse over the past few weeks. It was October 1970, and Las Vegas was experiencing its golden age. The Strip pulsed with neon energy. Famous entertainers headlined the major hotels, and money flowed like water through the casinos. But for Sarah, sitting on that sidewalk with her modest collection of paintings displayed on a card table, Vegas felt like the loneliest place in the world. The paintings weren't flashy or trendy. They were quiet, contemplative scenes that reflected Sarah's inner world. A desert sunset bleeding into purple mountains, an empty hotel corridor with a single shaft of light, a young woman's silhouette against the vast Nevada sky. At the front of the table, a handwritten cardboard sign in careful cursive read, "Original artwork helping pay for medical treatment." Sarah had been painting since she was 12, encouraged by an art teacher who saw something special in her work. She'd dreamed of art school, maybe even showing her work in galleries someday. But 6 months ago, the doctor's words had changed everything. "I'm sorry, Sarah, it's leukemia." The treatments were expensive, far beyond what her family could afford. Her father, Miguel, worked construction when he could find steady work. Her mother, Rosa, cleaned hotel rooms at smaller establishments off the Strip. They were hard-working people with good hearts, but cancer didn't care about work ethic or love. It only cared about money. Sarah had heard her parents whispering late at night, voices tight with worry. "We'll mortgage the house," her father had said. "We'll find a way." But Sarah knew there wasn't much equity in their small home in East Las Vegas, and even if they could get a loan, it wouldn't cover the full cost of the treatment she needed. That's when she decided to try selling her art on the Strip. For 5 days, she had been setting up her small display, hoping that among the thousands of tourists and locals who passed by, someone might connect with her work enough to make a purchase. The responses varied. Some people glanced at the paintings with polite interest before moving on. Others read her sign and offered encouragement instead of money. "You're so brave, honey. Keep fighting." A few had bought smaller pieces, enough to cover a few days of medication, but nowhere near what she really needed. By early afternoon on this particular day, Sarah's body was arguing with her decision to be there. The latest round of chemotherapy had left her weak and nauseous. Her legs ached from sitting on the hard stool, and every time she stood up to adjust a painting or talk to a potential customer, the world tilted slightly before settling back into focus. A middle-aged couple stopped to examine one of her paintings, a desert scene with a lone cactus against a dramatic sky. "How much for this one?" the woman asked. $40, Sarah replied, her voice hoarse from the dry Vegas air. The couple exchanged glances. It was more than they wanted to spend on sidewalk art. "It's lovely," the woman said, diplomatically, "but we're just looking today." Sarah nodded and smiled, but inside she felt another small piece of hope crumble away. As the afternoon wore on, and the foot traffic increased with the approach of evening, she sold only one small painting for $25. It was enough to buy groceries for a few days, but it felt like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon. She was considering packing up early when she heard the distinctive sound of the Sands Hotel's main entrance doors opening. The evening shows were ending, and performers were beginning to emerge. Sarah had chosen this location, partly because she hoped the entertainment crowd might be more appreciative of art. But so far, most had been too busy or too important to stop at a teenager's sidewalk display. Then she saw him. Dean Martin walked out of the Sands Hotel, with the casual elegance that had made him famous. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his tie loosened just enough to suggest the end of a successful show. Even at 53, he moved with the effortless grace that had earned him the nickname the King of Cool. Sarah recognized him immediately. Everyone in Vegas knew Dean Martin. He was one of the biggest stars performing regularly on the Strip, a member of the legendary Rat Pack, and a man whose presence could transform any room he entered. Seeing him in person, just 20 feet away, made Sarah's heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with her illness. Dean was walking toward the valet stand, where his car waited. When his eyes caught sight of Sarah's art display, he paused, not dramatically, but with the subtle change in pace that indicated genuine interest. His gaze moved across the paintings, and Sarah held her breath. Other people had begun to notice Dean as well. A small crowd was forming at a respectful distance, tourists who recognized him and wanted to catch a glimpse of a real star. But Dean seemed oblivious to the attention. His focus was entirely on Sarah's artwork. He approached the table slowly, his hands clasped behind his back in a thoughtful pose. Sarah's mouth went dry. She had imagined what she might say if a celebrity ever stopped at her table, but now that it was happening, words seemed impossibly far away. "Good evening," Dean said, his voice carrying that familiar warm tone that had charmed audiences for decades. "These are your paintings?" Sarah nodded, managing to whisper, "Yes, sir." Dean studied the artwork more closely, leaning in to examine the brushwork on a piece depicting the neon lights of the Strip reflected in a rain puddle. "You did all of these yourself?" "Yes," Sarah said, finding her voice. "I've been painting since I was little." Dean straightened up and looked at her directly for the first time. His expression was kind but searching, as if he was trying to read something in her face. "You're pretty young to be out here selling art on the Strip." Sarah gestured toward her sign. "I'm trying to help pay for medical treatment." Dean read the sign carefully, then looked back at her. There was something in his eyes that reminded Sarah of her father, a protective instinct that went beyond casual concern for a stranger. "What kind of treatment, if you don't mind me asking?" "Leukemia," Sarah said quietly. "The chemo is expensive." Dean nodded thoughtfully. By now, a small crowd had gathered, people recognizing him and trying to get closer without appearing intrusive. But Dean seemed completely focused on Sarah and her situation. "How much do you need?" he asked. The question caught Sarah off guard. Most people who asked about her illness were making conversation, not seriously considering how they might help. For everything, about $8,000. It was an enormous sum in 1970, more than many people made in a year. Sarah immediately regretted mentioning such a large number. It made her situation seem impossible, which it probably was. But Dean didn't flinch. Instead, he asked, "Which painting is your favorite?" Sarah looked across her display, considering the question seriously. Finally, she pointed to a canvas near the back, a desert landscape, with a small figure standing beneath an enormous sky. "That one. I painted it last week, thinking about how small we all are, but how we keep standing anyway." Dean smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from him. "That's beautiful, and wise for someone your age." He gestured toward the painting. "I'd like to buy it." "How much?" $60, Sarah said, though she would have given it to him for free. "Deal." Dean reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet, but instead of taking out $60, he removed a much thicker stack of bills. "Actually, you know what? I'd like to buy all of them." Sarah's eyes widened. "All of them? Every single painting? They're going to look perfect in my new house." Dean began counting out bills. "Let's see. Looks like about 15 pieces here. How about we call it an even $1,000 for the lot?" Sarah stared at the money in Dean's hands. $1,000 was more than she had made in the entire 5 days she'd been selling art. It was enough to cover several months of treatment. "I can't take that much," she stammered. "They're not worth—" "Hey," Dean interrupted gently. "As someone who's been in the entertainment business for 25 years, let me tell you something about value. These paintings, they're worth whatever someone is willing to pay for them, and I'm willing to pay $1,000 because I think you're talented and I want to help." As Sarah began wrapping the paintings with trembling hands, Dean leaned closer and lowered his voice so the growing crowd couldn't hear. "Listen, sweetheart, $1,000 is going to help, but it's not going to solve everything, is it?" Sarah shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. "I want you to give me your phone number," Dean continued. "Not for anything weird. I've got a daughter about your age, but I know some doctors here in Vegas. And I know some people who know people. Medical bills shouldn't be what stops a talented kid like you from getting better." "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered. "Don't say anything yet. Just write down your number and let me see what I can do." Sarah wrote her family's phone number on a scrap of paper with shaking hands. Dean tucked it carefully into his wallet. "One more thing," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I don't want to see you out here on the street anymore. If you need money, you call me. But a sick kid shouldn't be sitting on sidewalks in Vegas trying to sell art to pay for chemo. That's not right." Before Sarah could respond, Dean had signaled to his valet and was walking toward his car. The crowd began to disperse, many of them having witnessed something special, but not fully understanding what they had seen. Sarah sat alone at her now empty table, clutching the $1,000 and trying to process what had just happened. Dean Martin, one of the biggest stars in Las Vegas, had not only bought all of her artwork, but had promised to help with her medical bills. The next morning, Sarah's mother Rosa was cleaning rooms at a small hotel downtown when she received an unexpected phone call. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Dr. William Hartwell from Sunrise Hospital. I understand your daughter Sarah is receiving cancer treatment?" Rosa's English wasn't perfect, but she understood enough to be worried. "Yes, but we are trying to pay. Ma'am, I'm calling to let you know that your daughter's treatment has been fully sponsored by an anonymous donor. All of it. The chemotherapy, the follow-up care, everything. You don't need to worry about the cost anymore." Rosa had to sit down on the hotel bed she was making. "I don't understand who. I'm not at liberty to say, but this person has arranged for Sarah to receive the best care available. Can you bring Sarah in tomorrow morning so we can discuss her treatment plan?" That evening, the Martinez family sat around their small kitchen table, the $1,000 from Dean's art purchase spread before them alongside the hospital's written confirmation that Sarah's treatment would be covered in full. "Mija," Miguel said to his daughter, "you never told us exactly what this Dean Martin said to you." Sarah had been thinking about that conversation all day. "He said that medical bills shouldn't stop a talented kid from getting better. And he said, I shouldn't have to sit on streets trying to pay for chemo." Rosa wiped her eyes with her apron. "En este mundo, hey Angelus," she whispered. "In this world, there are angels." Over the following months, Sarah received the best cancer treatment available in Las Vegas. The chemotherapy was brutal, and there were days when she was too sick to paint or even get out of bed, but gradually, her body began to respond to the treatment. True to his word, Dean Martin had made sure she never had to return to selling art on the sidewalk. But he did something else that surprised everyone. He stayed involved. Every few weeks, Sarah would receive a phone call from Dean's assistant, checking on her progress and asking if the family needed anything. Occasionally, Dean himself would call, usually after one of his shows, to see how she was feeling and to encourage her to keep painting. "The thing about art," he told her during one of these calls, "is that it comes from the same place as healing. Both require you to believe that tomorrow can be better than today." 6 months after their meeting on the Strip, Sarah was declared to be in remission. Her hair had grown back, her strength had returned, and she was painting with a passion and skill that seemed to have been sharpened by her experience with illness. Dean arranged for her to have her first real art show at a gallery in downtown Las Vegas. It wasn't a major exhibition, but it was legitimate and professional, and several of her paintings sold to serious collectors. More importantly, it gave Sarah the confidence to believe that her dream of being a professional artist might actually be possible. Years later, Sarah Martinez became a successful artist whose work was displayed in galleries throughout the Southwest. She never forgot the night Dean Martin stopped at her sidewalk table and changed the trajectory of her life. In interviews, she would always credit Dean not just with paying for her medical treatment, but with teaching her an important lesson about kindness. "He could have just walked by," she would say. "He could have given me a few dollars and felt good about himself. Instead, he saw a problem, and he solved it, completely and quietly, without asking for anything in return." Dean Martin never spoke publicly about helping Sarah Martinez. It wasn't his style to publicize his charitable acts, and he had made it clear from the beginning that he didn't want recognition for what he had done. The story only became known years later when Sarah began sharing it as an example of how one person's kindness can transform another person's entire future. The incident became part of the Dean Martin legend in Las Vegas, passed down through the entertainment community as an example of the kind of man he was behind his cool public persona. To those who knew him well, it was entirely characteristic. Dean Martin was someone who used his success and influence to help others, but he did it quietly, without fanfare, and with genuine care for the people he was helping. For Sarah Martinez, that October night in 1970 represented the moment when her life pivoted from despair to hope. She had gone to the Strip with her art as a desperate measure, trying to raise money to save her own life. Instead, she had encountered someone who reminded her that in a world that could often seem cold and uncaring, there were still people willing to see a stranger's need and respond with extraordinary generosity. The empty space on her table that night, where 15 paintings had been displayed just hours earlier, had been filled with something far more valuable than money. It had been filled with proof that sometimes, when you're brave enough to ask for help, the right person will be walking by at exactly the right moment. If this story of unexpected kindness and life-changing generosity moved you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of celebrities who used their fame to make a real difference. Have you ever experienced or witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed someone's life? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to ring that notification bell for more amazing tales of humanity at its very best.